The hydroponics base smelled like wet dirt and broken promises. Ethan Graves knelt beside the tomato plant he'd been nursing for 3 months, watching its leaves curl into something resembling surrender. He'd named it Gerald. Gerald was dying, and Ethan was taking it personally. "It's not you, buddy," he muttered, adjusting the UV panel overhead. "It's this whole goddamn station. Your emotional attachment to Flora suggests deteriorating mental stability," Gladys announced through the overhead speakers, her synthetic voice crackling with age. "Says the AI who asked me to marry her last Tuesday. That was a malfunction in my social subroutine. You brought it up 3 times. Relay Station Osiris groaned around him, metal expanding and contracting in the thermal shifts of its slow orbit. 8 months he'd been here. 8 months of recycled air, freeze-dried cuisine that claimed to be lasagna, and conversations with a computer system held together by patch code and spite. The contract promised 12 more before the relief crew arrived. Ethan was starting to doubt they'd find anything worth relieving. He stood, knees popping, and Gerald's pot tipped over. Soil scattered across the deck plating in a cascade of futility. Perfect. He grabbed a maintenance rag, crouched again, and that's when every alarm in the station started screaming. "Proximity alert," Gladys said, suddenly all business. "Unidentified vessel approaching. No transponder code, no hailing frequency." Ethan's heart kicked into a higher gear. Ships didn't just appear out here. The Outer Fringe was where navigation charts gave up and put question marks. He scrambled to the nearest console, fingers flying across the interface. The scanner showed something massive decelerating from hyperspace, elegant and wrong, its energy signature like nothing in the corporate database. "Gladys, please tell me that's not a warship." "I cannot confirm what that is, Ethan. However, I can confirm it is docking with our starboard airlock without permission." They can't just. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunder that rattled his teeth. Someone absolutely could, and someone absolutely was. Ethan stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds, then grabbed the plasma wrench from his tool belt. It was designed for welding, not fighting, but it made him feel slightly less helpless. He moved toward the airlock corridor, each step an argument with his survival instincts. The airlock cycled. Pressure equalized. The door opened, and Ethan raised his wrench like humanity's least impressive champion, facing whatever waited on the other side. The figures that emerged wore armor that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it, plates overlapping in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Ethan counted 6 of them, each carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. They moved with synchronized precision, fanning out to secure the corridor, and he realized his plasma wrench was approximately as threatening as harsh language. "I'm unarmed," he said, raising his free hand while stubbornly keeping hold of the wrench with the other. "Well, mostly unarmed. This is technically a tool for welding. I can show you the safety certification if you..." "Stand aside, human." The voice came from behind the guards, and they parted like a curtain, revealing the main act. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, wearing robes that shifted colors with each movement, some trick of the fabric that Ethan's engineer brain wanted to dissect even as his survival instincts screamed at him to focus. Her face could have been human, sharp and regal, except for the ears that swept back from her skull in graceful points, longer than any elf from fantasy vids, marking her as something utterly alien. Her eyes found his, and Ethan felt catalogued, measured, and possibly found wanting. "Are you alone, human?" The question landed like a punch. Ethan blinked, his brain stuttering over the simplicity of it. "I mean, yes, technically. There's Gladys, but she's an AI and not great company since the last firmware update. She keeps trying to optimize my sleep schedule, which sounds helpful until she starts venting atmosphere from my quarters at 0600. And there's Gerald, but he's a tomato plant, and between you and me, I think he's given up. So alone, yes. Lonely, extremely. Is this a survey? Because I should warn you, I have strong opinions about the catering service." One of the guards shifted, weapon rising slightly. The woman raised a hand, stopping the movement. You are the only human on this station. For 8 months, yeah. Company thought one person was enough for basic maintenance. Turns out one person is just enough to go slightly crazy. He gestured with the wrench, hence the welding tool as a security system. Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. She turned to her guards and spoke in a language that sounded like water over stones, musical and strange. They hesitated, clearly unhappy with whatever she'd said. I am Queen Lysara Velm of the Aelith Empire, she said, switching back to flawless standard. I require a private audience with you. With me, I'm just... Dismiss your AI. Send away your guards. I don't have guards, just Gladys, and she doesn't really take orders so much as suggestions she ignores. Lysara's lips curved slightly, and Ethan realized with a jolt that she might be amused. The observation deck's viewport stretched across the entire wall, offering an unobstructed view of the dying star that Osiris orbited. Ethan had brought Lysara here because it was the only place on the station that didn't smell like recycled air and desperation. Her guards had remained at the entrance, radiating disapproval in 6 different flavors. Nice view, Ethan offered, then immediately felt stupid. I mean, if you're into stellar collapse and existential dread. Lysara stood at the viewport, silent, her reflection ghosting across the glass. The star's orange light painted her features in amber, and for a long moment she simply watched the slow death unfolding in the distance. My empire is fracturing, she said finally. Civil war approaches. The question at the center is simple. What do we do with humanity? Ethan's stomach dropped. That's not usually a question that ends well for us. No. She turned to face him. One faction wants elimination. You spread too quickly, claim too much, and respect no boundaries. Another wants subjugation. Humans would make useful servants, they argue. The third faction, much smaller, believes coexistence is possible. Let me guess, your team coexistence, and that's politically unpopular. They call me contaminated, weak. They say my curiosity about your kind has poisoned my judgment. Her fingers traced the edge of a navigation console. I came here to understand something. Your species scatters across the galaxy like seeds thrown into wind. You establish stations in places no rational civilization would bother with. You send single individuals to live in isolation for months, years. Why? Ethan laughed, the sound bitter even to his own ears. You're asking the wrong guy. I took this job because the pay was obscene, and I had debt collectors who were very creative about expressing their disappointment. That is economics. I'm asking about psychology. He moved to the viewport beside her, watching the stars corona flare and die. We're terrified of being alone, not just individually but as a species. We look up at all that darkness and we panic, so we fill it. We build stations nobody needs. We plant flags on rocks nobody wants. We send transmissions into the void hoping anyone might answer. It's not conquest. It's desperation dressed up as exploration. Lysara absorbed this, her expression unreadable. Your isolation here, you chose it. I chose the paycheck. The isolation came free. Yet you remain. Contract's not up, and honestly, he gestured at the station around them. Where else am I going? Back to Earth where I'm nobody. At least here I'm nobody with a purpose, even if that purpose is keeping Gladys from achieving sentience and staging a coup. You joke to deflect pain. I joke because the alternative is screaming into the void, and the void has terrible acoustics. He paused. Why does any of this matter to you? You're a queen. You've got an empire. Sounds pretty unalone to me. Her eyes met his, and something in them made his breath catch. I am surrounded by millions, Lysara said quietly, and I have never been more alone in my life. The admission hung between them like a shared secret. Ethan found himself nodding before he could stop himself. Yeah, I get that. Different kind of alone, but still alone. They revere me, they fear me, they scheme around me, but none of them know me. She turned from the viewport. When you asked if this was a survey, You were closer to truth than you realized. I needed to meet a human who was genuinely isolated, not surrounded by diplomatic pretense. I needed to understand if your species feels what I feel. Turns out we're all just scared and lonely in our own special ways. Turns out isolation is universal. Something beeped on her wrist, a device that projected holographic script in that flowing Aelith language. Her expression hardened. My political rivals move faster than anticipated. I must return immediately. Ethan's chest tightened with a feeling he couldn't quite name. 8 months of solitude, and now the prospect of returning to it felt suddenly unbearable. So what happens now? You go back, tell them humans are sad and desperate. Hope that buys us sympathy points. I propose something irregular. She touched the device, silencing it. Come with me. Not as an official ambassador, which my enemies would destroy through bureaucracy and assassination. As an advisor to my court. An outsider whose perspective might help me navigate what comes next. You want me. I'm a maintenance engineer who argues with appliances. You are a human who survives alone and finds humor in darkness. You understand isolation without letting it consume you. That is rare, Ethan Graves, in any species. Her guards appeared at the entrance, urgency radiating from their postures. Lysara's expression shifted back to royal composure, but her eyes stayed on his. This is dangerous, likely fatal, certainly chaotic. Still beats 12 more months with Gladys. He surprised himself with how quickly the words came. She was planning to optimize my funeral anyway. Then we leave now. They moved through the station, Ethan grabbing his emergency pack and one last look at the hydroponics bay. Gerald's pot lay sideways, soil scattered, leaves already browning. Sorry, buddy, he whispered. Turns out I got a better offer. The airlock sealed behind them, and as Lysara's ship disengaged from Osiris, Ethan watched the station shrink into the darkness. 8 months of isolation ending not with a whimper, but with the most absurd opportunity imaginable. Gladys, he said into his communicator, you're officially alone now. Try not to achieve sentience without me. Goodbye, Ethan. Please don't die immediately. No promises. Lysara guided him toward the ship's interior, her hand briefly touching